Two experienced coin graders could examine this exact Morgan dollar and reach opposite conclusions. One sees the flat breast and calls the coin circulated. The other sees the same missing detail but calls it uncirculated. Neither grader missed what you were seeing. They disagree about what caused it. So before we examine the evidence, make your call. Is this coin circulated or uncirculated? And when two graders disagree this sharply, how do we decide who is right? Coin grading is often presented as if it were a measurement. Examine the coin, count the marks, check the luster, assign the number. But a grader does not simply record what is visible. A grader must interpret how those visible features were created, decide how important each one is, and then combine all of that evidence into a final judgment. That creates several places where two knowledgeable people can disagree. They might disagree about whether a coin is circulated or uncirculated. They might agree that it's uncirculated, but disagree about the severity of its marks. They may weigh strike, luster, and eye appeal differently. And when all of those judgments are combined, their final grades can finish 1 or even 2 points apart. This 1899 Morgan dollar gives us an excellent example because the disagreement begins with something both graders can clearly see. The center of the eagle's breast is flat. Much of the expected feather detail is missing. That's the observation. The interpretation is where the disagreement begins. One grader might reason that the breast is one of the highest and most exposed points on the reverse of the coin. If this coin entered circulation, that raised area could have contacted other surfaces first. Friction could have removed the fine feather detail and left the breast looking smooth. That interpretation leads toward a circulated grade. Another grader could examine the identical area and reach a different conclusion. Morgan dollars were not always struck with enough pressure to transfer every part of the design completely. If the metal did not fully enter the deepest recesses of the die, the coin could leave the press without complete feather detail. In that case, the flatness was created when the coin was struck. It would not prove that the coin ever circulated. That interpretation leaves an uncirculated grade possible. Same coin, same flat breast. Two very different explanations. And both explanations are reasonable until we test them against the rest of the evidence. This distinction matters because missing detail and lost detail are not the same thing. Missing detail may never have been struck into the coin. Lost detail was once present and was later removed by friction. A still image can show us where the design is incomplete, but it cannot always tell us which of those events occurred. For that, we need to stop judging only the shape of the feathers and begin examining the surface itself. Watch what happens as the light crosses the breast. Don't try to make the missing feathers reappear. They will not. Instead, follow the light through the flat area. Does the surface response stop when it reaches the center of the breast? Does it become dull or lifeless? Does the light appear broken in a way that separates the breast from the protected surfaces around it? Or does the light continue through the disputed area as part of the same broader movement? This is where two graders may begin to separate wear from weak strike. Circulation friction does more than reduce detail. It changes the original surface. A high point exposed to friction may develop a different texture or sheen from the protected areas around it. The luster can weaken, flatten, or become disrupted where the surfaces have been disturbed. Weak strike creates a different problem. The design may be incomplete, but the original surface can remain. The feathers may be flat while the light continues to move through that flatness. On this coin, the breast does not contain the sharp detail we might want to see, but the moving light continues across the central area. Now that does not automatically prove the coin is uncirculated. No single feature should decide the entire grade. It does, however, weaken the argument that missing feather detail alone proves circulation. Now, we need corroboration. If the breast lost its detail through ordinary wear, we should look for corresponding evidence on other exposed parts of the coin. On the reverse, that includes the eagle's head and the upper surfaces on both wings. Examine the head first. The detail is not exceptionally sharp, but the important question is not whether every feather is fully defined. The question is whether the surface shows the same kind of friction we would expect if circulation is what had flattened the breast. Now follow the light across the upper wings. Again, we're not merely counting feather lines, we're looking for a pattern. Does the surface response remain consistent across these exposed areas? Or do the highest points become visibly different from the protected portions of the design? If circulation created the flat breast, the rest of the reverse should help support that interpretation. Instead, the moving light behaves with considerable continuity across the breast, head, and wings. That makes isolated wear on the breast less convincing. But a grader should not stop after examining only one side. On the obverse, one of the corresponding high points is the hair above Liberty's ear. Now this area is especially important because it can show friction early. If the reversed breast is flat because the coin circulated, the hair may provide supporting evidence. Look closely at the hair directly above the ear. There is softness in the design, but softness is still only the observation. Now, watch the surface as the light crosses it. We're asking the same question we asked on the reverse. Does the light break across the exposed hair? Does the high point develop a dull or disturbed appearance? Or does the surface continue to respond as part of the surrounding coin? Then, examine the open fields. Marks in the fields do not automatically mean circulation. Morgan dollars could acquire contact marks from handling and contact with other coins without ever entering commerce. A bag mark and circulation friction are different forms of evidence. One affects a localized point of contact. The other can change the texture and luster of exposed surfaces. This is why a grader must examine the entire coin rather than allowing one conspicuous feature to control the conclusion. The breast raises the question. The head, the wings, the hair, and the fields test the proposed answer. Now compare this 1899 O with a more sharply defined 1885 O. The difference is immediate. The 1885 O shows stronger feather definition across the breast. More detail was transferred into the coin when it was struck. Its head and wings also appear more sharply defined. Placed beside the 1899 O, it would be easy to call the sharper coin the better coin and the flatter coin the worn coin. But that comparison would mix two different variables. Sharpness tells us how completely the design was transferred. Preservation tells us what happened to the surface after the coin was struck. Those two qualities can influence each other visually, but they are not interchangeable. Watch both coins under moving light. The 1885 O has stronger breast detail, but it also has a conspicuous contact mark on the breast. We're not using it as an example of a perfectly preserved coin. We're using it to establish what stronger design transfer looks like. The 1899 O has much weaker detail, yet its surface detail can preserve original light behavior through the flat area. One coin demonstrates a sharper strike. The other demonstrates why weak detail cannot be treated as automatic proof of wear. This matched comparison helps explain why experienced graders can disagree even when both understand Morgan dollars. A grader who gives the missing breast detail too much weight may place the coin on the circulated side of the line. A grader who recognizes the strike pattern and gives greater weight to the surviving surface behavior may place it on the uncirculated side. The disagreement is not necessarily caused by inexperience. It can come from how each grader weighs conflicting evidence. For this 1899-0, the complete evidence supports the uncirculated interpretation more strongly than it does the circulated one. The flat breast appears to be primarily a strike issue. The light continues through the disputed area. The surrounding reverse high points do not provide convincing corroboration for wear, and the obverse does not reveal the broader pattern of friction we would want to see before calling the coin circulated. That resolves the first disagreement, but it does not produce one inevitable mint-state number. Two graders could both agree that this coin is uncirculated and still finish a point or two apart. One might judge the contact marks more severely, and another might place greater weight on the amount and quality of the remaining luster. They could disagree about how much the weak strike should limit the grade. One might find the overall appearance attractive despite the softness. Another might believe the flat central reverse reduces the coin's eye appeal enough to hold it back. The grading standards provide structure, but the grader must still decide how the evidence fits within those standards. This is especially difficult when a coin has competing qualities. Strong luster can pull the judgment upward. Heavy marks can pull it downward. A weak strike can make preservation harder to interpret. Eye appeal can change how strongly every other feature is experienced. There is no instrument that combines those qualities and displays a single indisputable number. That does not make coin grading arbitrary. A disciplined opinion is not the same thing as a random opinion. Both graders should examine the same major categories. Both should understand the difference between strike weakness and friction. Both should test an interpretation against the entire coin. But at the boundary between two grades, reasonable judgment remains. That is why professional grading companies use more than one grader. Independent opinions help prevent one person's interpretation from becoming the final answer without review. When those opinions differ, the coin can receive additional examination before a grade is assigned. The holder may display one number, but that number is the result of a judgment process, not a mechanical measurement. And that leads to the most important collector rule in this episode. Do not ask only what detail is missing. Ask, why is it missing? Then test your explanation against the surface, the corresponding high points, and the rest of the coin. If you called this 1899-0 circulated at the beginning, the flat breast gave you a reasonable basis for that decision. But the moving light revealed evidence that the flat design could not. If you called it uncirculated, the surface supports your conclusion, but the comparison also shows why another grader might hesitate. That is the real reason two expert graders can disagree. They may see exactly the same coin. They may identify exactly the same features. But grading requires them to decide what caused those features, how much each feature matters, and where the combined evidence belongs on the scale. The disagreement begins where the observation becomes interpretation, and the best way to evaluate either conclusion is not to follow the number, follow the evidence. If this examination changed your original call, let me know in the comments which feature changed it. Was it the breast, the moving light, the other high points, or the sharper comparison coin? And if you want to understand how the coin market moved from individual seller opinions to independent grading and sealed holders, watch before coin slabs, Who Could You Trust next? Because the slab made a grade easier to trade, but it did not make human judgment disappear.